The night began like any other on the wind-carved cliffs above the valley, but something in the air felt wrong. The breeze that usually tugged at the trees had gone still, as if the island were holding its breath. Even the insects had quieted. That was when the first drumbeat rolled across the ridge, low, steady, ancient. It didn't sound like music. It sounded like a warning. Malia was driving home along the Pali Highway when she felt the shift. She'd always joked that the wind up there had a personality, always pushing, always impatient. But tonight it wasn't pushing at all. It wasn't moving. Her headlights swept across the curve ahead, and that's when she saw the glow, a faint orange shimmer drifting between the trees. At first she thought it was a brush fire, but then the shapes emerged behind it. Tall figures moving in perfect formation, torches held high, flames bending but never flickering. Their silhouettes were sharp against the darkness, helmets crowned with feathers, spears rising like shadows of old gods. She slowed the car, heart pounding. The figures glided across the ridge without lifting their feet, their bodies rigid, their pace unnervingly smooth. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, the same warning she'd heard since childhood. If you hear the drums at night, do not watch. Do not stand. Do not breathe their air. She slid down in her seat, pressing herself flat as the chanting rolled over the car, deep, layered, vibrating through the metal frame. When she finally dared to look again, the ridge was empty, but the air smelled faintly of smoke, and the wind returned all at once, as if exhaling. Far below that same ridge, in a quiet valley where the houses sat on old family land, Kimo was dealing with a different kind of disturbance. His dog had begun barking, not the frantic bark of a threat, but a trembling, fearful sound he'd never heard from the animal before. When he stepped outside, flashlight in hand, he found the dog frozen, staring at the Thai plants along the property line. The leaves were swaying even though the night was still. And through the gaps, Kimo saw them. Shapes moving in a straight line, lit by a soft golden glow. He didn't need to see more. He dropped to his knees immediately, forehead pressed to the dirt. His grandmother had drilled the rule into him since he was old enough to walk. Face down. Do not look. Do not speak. Do not acknowledge. The chanting passed over him like a wave, vibrating through his bones. The dog whimpered and lay flat beside him. The procession moved straight through the yard, through the tea plants, through the fence without disturbing a single leaf. When the sound faded, the yard was untouched, but the air smelled of sweat, smoke, and something metallic, like old weapons left out in the rain. Across the island, on the jagged black lava fields near La Perouse Bay, a photography student named Kai was setting up a long-exposure shot. He loved the way the lava caught the moonlight, how the landscape looked like another planet. He clicked the shutter and waited, listening to the distant crash of waves. Halfway through the exposure, a glow appeared on the horizon, a soft, wavering light moving in a perfectly straight line. He thought it was hikers at first, but the light didn't bob or sway. It moved with the same steady rhythm as the faint drum beats he suddenly realized he was hearing. Kai zoomed in with his lens, and what he saw made him stumble backward. A column of torches, each held by a tall, rigid figure whose outline was too sharp, too defined, too ancient. Their steps were synchronized, their posture unbroken. He snapped photo after photo, hands shaking, but when he checked the images, the figures were nothing but blurred streaks of gold, as if the camera refused to capture them. The chanting grew louder. The drums quickened. Kai remembered the stories, the warnings, the rules. He lay flat on the cold lava and didn't move until the sound faded into the sea. By dawn, the island felt normal again. The wind returned. The birds sang. The roads filled with commuters who had no idea what had passed through the night. But the people who had seen it, Malia on the ridge, Kimo in his yard, Kai on the lava fields carried the same unspoken understanding. They hadn't witnessed ghosts. They had stepped into a moment where the past pushed through the present, where something ancient and ceremonial marched along paths older than memory. The stories were different, but the details were the same. The drums, the chanting, the torches, the gliding steps, the rigid posture, the ancient trails, the rule to lie flat and never look. These weren't random hauntings. They weren't isolated events. They were pieces of a pattern, a procession that didn't care about time, or roads, or the people who accidentally crossed its path. And as the sun rose over the island, each of them felt the same quiet truth settle in their bones. The marchers weren't gone. They had simply passed through. The island didn't settle after that night. It felt as if something had been stirred awake, something that had always been there but usually kept to its own paths. The wind carried a different kind of silence now, not empty, but expectant. People who had never met, who lived miles apart, began to feel the same strange pressure in the air, the same prickling at the back of the neck, the same sense that the night was watching. It started with small things, a neighbor's porch light flickering at the exact moment the drums began in the distance, a fisherman swearing he saw torchlight moving across the cliffs where no trail existed, a group of teenagers hearing chanting echo across a beach that had been deserted moments before. The stories spread quietly, whispered between friends, mentioned in passing at the market, shared in hushed tones at family gatherings. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone felt it. The marchers were moving again. One evening, just after sunset, Malia found herself unable to sleep. She kept replaying the moment on the ridge, the torches, the chanting, the way the wind had stopped as if bowing to something older. She stepped outside to clear her head, hoping the cool air would settle her nerves. But the night felt heavy, as if the darkness had weight. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the yard. She heard footsteps behind her. Not human footsteps, these were too soft, too synchronized, like many feet brushing the ground at the same time. She turned, expecting to see a stray dog or maybe a neighbor walking by. But the street was empty. The shadows didn't move. The air didn't stir. Then the footsteps came again, closer this time, though nothing was there. She backed toward her door, heart pounding. The footsteps stopped. And then, faint but unmistakable, she heard the distant thump of a drum. One beat, then another. Slow, measured, ancient. She slammed the door and locked it, pressing her back against the wood as if something might push through. Across the island, Kimo was having his own restless night. He sat on his porch with a cup of tea, staring at the Thai plants that had once made him feel safe. Now they only reminded him of the shapes that had passed through them, untouched and unbothered by the physical world. The dog lay at his feet, ears twitching at every sound. The night was quiet, too quiet. Then the dog lifted its head, growling low in its throat. Kimo followed its gaze toward the far end of the yard. The Thai plants were swaying again, not wildly, but gently, rhythmically, as if brushed by hands that weren't there. The air grew thick, humid, charged with something electric. Kimo stood slowly, every instinct telling him to go inside, to hide, to lie flat. But something held him in place. A presence. A pressure. A feeling that he was being watched not with malice but with recognition, as if the marchers remembered him from the night before. A faint glow appeared between the leaves. Not bright enough to be a torch, but warm, pulsing. alive. It moved in a straight line, passing behind the plants, then disappearing as quickly as it had come. The chanting followed soft at first, then rising, then fading again as the glow drifted away. Kimo whispered a prayer and went inside, bolting the door behind him. Meanwhile, Kai had returned to the lava fields, unable to shake the feeling that he had captured something important, even if the camera refused to show it. He set up his tripod again, determined to try a different angle, a different lens, anything that might reveal what he had seen. The night was darker than before, the sky clouded over, the air still. He clicked the shutter and waited. This time, the glow didn't appear on the horizon. It appeared behind him. He felt it before he saw it, a warmth on the back of his neck, like standing too close to a fire. He turned slowly, heart hammering, and saw a single torch floating above the lava, its flames steady and silent. The figure holding it was tall, rigid, its outline shimmering like heat rising from asphalt. Kai froze. The figure didn't move. It didn't breathe. It simply stood there, torch raised, watching him with a presence that felt both ancient and aware. Then, from somewhere beyond the figure, the drums began again. One beat. Then another. Then many. The torchbearer lifted its head as if listening. The chanting rose in the distance, growing louder, closer, more layered. Kai felt the ground vibrate beneath his feet. The air thickened. The darkness behind the torchbearer shifted, and more figures emerged, dozens of them, their torches forming a river of fire across the black rock. Kai dropped to the ground, pressing his face against the cold lava. The chanting washed over him, powerful and resonant, vibrating through his bones. He didn't breathe. He didn't dare. The procession passed around him, through him. Beyond him, a tide of ancient warriors marching along a path older than memory. When the sound finally faded, Kai lifted his head. The lava field was empty. The torchbearer was gone. But the air still smelled of smoke and salt and something metallic, like old armor left out in the rain. By morning, the stories had begun to spread. People who had never spoken to each other were suddenly sharing the same details: the drums, the chanting, the torches, the gliding steps, the rigid posture, the ancient paths. It was as if the island itself had decided to remind everyone of what walked its land after dark. And though no one said it out loud, everyone felt the same truth settling in their bones. The marchers were not just passing through. They were gathering. By the time the stories began circulating across the island, something deeper had already taken root, a sense that these encounters weren't isolated, weren't random, and weren't simply tricks of the night. The people who had seen the marchers didn't describe ghosts. They described a procession, a ritual, a ceremony that felt older than the land itself. And that's because, in many ways, it is. To understand the night marchers, you have to understand Hawaii, not the postcard version, but the real one. The one built on layers of history, genealogy, warfare, and sacred tradition. The one where the past isn't gone. It's simply waiting beneath the surface. The night marchers, known traditionally as huakaʻi, are not monsters. They are not demons. They are not malevolent spirits wandering without purpose. They are warriors, chiefs, royal guards, and ancestral processions tied to specific places, specific nights, and specific histories. According to oral tradition, these processions appear along ancient pathways, trails that once connected heiau, temples, battlefields, royal compounds, and sacred sites. These paths still exist even if modern roads have been built over them. And when the marchers come through, they follow those same routes, unchanged by time. The descriptions across generations are remarkably consistent. Torches glowing with an unnatural steadiness, drums beating in perfect rhythm, chanting that vibrates through the chest, and warriors who move without touching the ground. Witnesses describe feathered helmets, spears, cloaks, and standards that match historical regalia worn by elite warriors and royal guards. The details are too specific, too culturally accurate, to be dismissed as imagination. One of the most striking elements of the legend is the kapu, the sacred law that governed ancient Hawaiian society. Certain chiefs Alicity Nuai were considered so sacred that commoners were forbidden to look at them. Their presence was announced by a procession of warriors, and anyone who saw them was required to lie face down, eyes to the ground, in complete submission. Failure to do so could result in immediate death. This is where the modern rule comes from. If you encounter the night marchers, lie flat. Do not look. Do not speak. Do not acknowledge. It isn't superstition, it's cultural memory. The marchers are said to appear on specific nights, tied to the lunar calendar nights, when the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds is thinner. Some locations are known hotspots: cliffs, valleys, old battlefields, heiau ruins, and coastal trails where warriors once traveled. People who live near these places grow up hearing the stories, learning the rules, and understanding that the marchers are not to be challenged or mocked. What makes the legend so compelling is the number of eyewitness accounts that share the same details despite coming from different decades, different islands. People describe the same sounds: drums, chanting, conch shells. They describe the same movements: gliding steps, rigid posture, synchronized formations. They describe the same sensations: pressure in the air, wind stopping suddenly, the smell of smoke or sweat or iron. These aren't the kinds of details that spread through pop culture. They're the kinds of details that come from lived experience. Anthropologists who study Hawaiian oral tradition note that stories of ancestral processions are not unique to Hawaii. Many cultures have legends of spirit armies, ghostly warriors, or ancestral marches that appear at night. But the night marchers stand apart because of how deeply they are tied to genealogy and place. They are not wandering spirits. They are returning spirits, returning to the places that mattered to them in life. Some historians believe the legend may have originated from real ceremonial processions that took place in ancient Hawaii. Royal processions were elaborate, highly structured events involving warriors, priests, attendants, and torchbearers. These processions often occurred at night, especially when traveling between sacred sites. Over time, as the old kapu system faded and the monarchy changed, the memory of these processions may have transformed into the spiritual phenomenon people describe today. But that explanation doesn't account for everything. It doesn't explain the reports of torches that glow without flickering, even in strong wind. It doesn't explain the chanting that seems to come from everywhere at once. It doesn't explain the way animals react: dogs freezing, birds falling silent, horses refusing to move. It doesn't explain the sudden stillness of the air, the pressure in the chest, the feeling of being watched by something ancient and aware. And it definitely doesn't explain the consistency of the sightings. Skeptics argue that the night marchers are a psychological phenomenon, a combination of fear, darkness, and cultural expectation. They point to the power of suggestion, the way stories shape perception, the way the mind fills in gaps when confronted with shadows and sound. They argue that people who grow up hearing the legend are more likely to interpret strange nighttime experiences through that lens. But that theory has a flaw. Many of the most detailed accounts come from people who didn't grow up in Hawaii, who didn't know the legend, who had no cultural context for what they saw. Tourists, new residents, military personnel, people who had never heard of huakaʻi describe the same details as locals, who have known the stories their whole lives. Then there are the physical traces, footprints in places no one could have walked, torches seen by multiple witnesses from different angles, animals reacting in ways that can't be explained by imagination alone. Some people report waking to find lines of disturbed grass or sand leading across their property, as if something had passed through in the night. One of the most chilling aspects of the legend is the idea that the marchers do not appear randomly. They appear with purpose. They appear along paths that matter. They appear when something is being remembered, honored, or reclaimed. Some elders say the marchers appear when the land is disturbed, when construction begins on sacred ground, when ancient trails are blocked, when the balance between the living and the ancestral is disrupted. Others say the marchers appear simply because they always have, because the past is not gone, because the ancestors still walk. Modern explanations range from the scientific to the supernatural. Some researchers suggest infrasound low-frequency vibrations that can cause feelings of dread, pressure, or unease. Others point to atmospheric conditions that can create optical illusions, making distant lights appear closer or distorted. Some believe the marchers are a form of collective memory, a cultural echo that manifests in moments of heightened awareness. But even these explanations fall short when confronted with the sheer number of consistent, independent accounts. Truth is, the night marchers occupy a space between history and haunting, between culture and mystery. They are not easily categorized. They are not easily dismissed. They are not easily explained. What makes the legend powerful is not just the fear it inspires, but the respect. The marchers are not villains. They are not predators. They are not hunting anyone. They are simply moving, following paths older than the roads, older than the houses, older than the people who now live on the land. They march because they always have. They march because the island remembers. They march because the past is never truly gone. And for those who encounter them, whether on a ridge, in a yard, or across a lava field, the experience is not just frightening, it is humbling. It is a reminder that the world is older, deeper, and more layered than we often realize. The marchers do not come to harm, they come to pass through. And if you happen to be in their way, the only thing you can do is show respect, lie flat, and wait for the procession to move on. If you want to understand why the night marchers endure, why the stories persist, why the sightings continue, why even skeptics lower their voices when speaking about them, you have to look beyond the encounters themselves. The marchers are not just a legend, they are a reflection of the island's memory, a living echo of a world that never truly disappeared. To begin with, the marchers are deeply tied to mana, the spiritual power that flows through people, places, and objects in Hawaiian belief. Mana is not metaphorical. It is a force respected, feared, cultivated, inherited. Warriors, chiefs, and priests carried immense mana, and their processions were not simply military movements, they were spiritual events. When people describe the overwhelming pressure in the air before the marchers appear, or the way the wind stops, or the way their chest tightens, they are describing something that aligns closely with the traditional understanding of mana, a presence so powerful it alters the environment around it. This is why the marchers are not seen as ghosts in the Western sense. They are not lost souls. They are not trapped. They are not wandering. They are processional, purposeful, ceremonial. They move with intention, following routes that once connected the most sacred places on the islands. Many of these routes still exist, even if they're hidden beneath asphalt or swallowed by forest. Locals can point to them narrow ridges, old footpaths, valleys where the air feels heavier than it should. These are the places where sightings cluster, where the drums are heard most often, where the torches appear in the distance like a line of fire ants moving across the dark. Some of the most well-known hotspots include the Pali Lookout, where fierce battles were fought, and where the wind behaves in ways that defy explanation. La Perouse Bay, where the lava fields feel untouched by time, and where torches have been seen moving across terrain. No human could safely cross at night. Waipio Valley, a place of kings, burial sites, and ancient pathways that cut through dense forest. Hawaiʻi Ruins, where the foundations of temples still hold the weight of centuries of ritual. These places are not random. They are steeped in history, in conflict, in ceremony. They are places where the boundary between the living and the ancestral is thin. To understand the marchers, you also have to understand ancient Hawaiian warfare. Battles were not chaotic clashes. They were structured, ritualized, and deeply spiritual. Warriors trained from childhood, learning not only combat but genealogy, chants, and protocol. Chiefs traveled with retinues of elite guards, torchbearers, and priests. Their movements were choreographed, their formations precise, their chants powerful enough to intimidate enemies before a single blow was struck. When modern witnesses describe the marchers moving in perfect unison, gliding without breaking formation, chanting in layered harmonies that seem to come from all directions, they are describing something that mirrors these ancient processions with uncanny accuracy. It's not just the movement that matches historical accounts, it's the hierarchy. Many sightings include a single figure at the front, taller or more elaborately adorned, carrying a staff or torch that glows brighter than the others. This aligns with descriptions of eyewitness, chiefs, or high-ranking warriors who led ceremonial marches. Behind them would be the kahuna, the priests, followed by the warriors, attendants, and torchbearers. Even the rule about lying flat has historical roots. In ancient times, the presence of a high-ranking chief was so sacred that commoners were forbidden to look directly at him. If they did, the chief's guards were obligated to kill them instantly, not out of cruelty, but out of adherence to the kapu system. The chief's mana was so powerful that an unworthy gaze was considered dangerous. This is why the modern rule persists. Do not look, do not stand, do not acknowledge. It is not fear, it is respect. But if the marchers are so deeply tied to history, why do they appear now? Why do sightings continue in an age of streetlights, highways, and smartphones? One explanation is that the marchers appear when the land is disturbed. Construction on sacred ground, development over burial sites, or the destruction of ancient trails can trigger a resurgence in sightings. Elders speak of the marchers as guardians of the land, protectors of history, reminders of what should not be forgotten. Another explanation is that the marchers appear when they are remembered. Stories have power, especially in cultures where oral tradition is the backbone of history. When people speak of the marchers, when they tell the stories, when they acknowledge the past responds. Not literally, perhaps, but symbolically through dreams, through sensations, through moments where the world feels older than it should. Then there is the psychological explanation. Some researchers argue that the marchers are a form of cultural imprinting, a shared expectation that shapes perception. If you grow up hearing about torches on the cliffs, you might interpret distant lights as something supernatural. If you hear drums in the wind, you might attribute them to spirits rather than acoustics. But this theory collapses when confronted with the sheer number of sightings from people who had never heard the legend before encountering it. Tourists, military personnel, new residents, people with no cultural context, describe the same details as locals, who have known the stories their whole lives. There is also the matter of consistency. Legends evolve, details shift, stories change. But the night marchers have remained remarkably stable across generations. The torches, the chanting, the gliding steps, the rigid posture, the ancient paths, the rule to lie flat. These elements appear again and again, unchanged, unembellished, unwavering. Some believe the marchers are a form of residual energy, a spiritual recording of ancient processions that replays under the right conditions. Others believe they are ancestral guardians, appearing to protect the land or warn the living. Some say they are omens, appearing before major events or shifts in the community. And then there are those who believe the marchers are not spirits at all, but beings of another realm, entities that intersect with our world only briefly. Following rules and rituals we can observe, but not fully understand. What makes the legend powerful is that it does not demand belief. It does not threaten. It does not chase. It does not harm. It simply exists, moving through the night with the same solemn purpose it has carried for centuries. For those who encounter the marchers, the experience is transformative. Fear is part of it. Yes, the primal fear of the unknown, the ancient fear of the dark. But there is also awe, reverence, a sense of witnessing something sacred, something that does not belong to the modern world but refuses to be erased by it. The marchers are not here to frighten. They are here to remind us of the land beneath our feet, remind us of the people who walked it before us, remind us that history is not a straight line but a circle, always returning, always repeating, always marching. And when the drums begin slow, steady, ancient the island listens. Because everyone knows what follows. The torches, the chanting, the procession, the past, moving through the present, the marchers, returning once more. If you made it this far into the darkness with me, thank you. Legends like the night marchers remind us that some stories don't fade. They walk beside us, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to be remembered. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hawaiian lore, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this channel more than you know. And if you want more stories like this, more hauntings, more folklore, more things that move through the night when the world is quiet, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Got your own encounter? A legend from your hometown? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And if you hear drums in the distance tonight, don't look.